7, so we'll start. Thank you everyone for coming. Is the recording working? Good, excellent. Right, apologies and reasons for absence. We know we've got one.
Councillor Lloyd-Smith is on holiday.
Good, accepted. Yeah, we're happy with that.
Community Warden Joe Boss is on duty tonight. Our PCSOs, Richards and Jones, are otherwise engaged.
Right, but we saw them this morning at the community market, both of them. First time we've seen them.
It's Luke, is it?
Yeah.
I think he's here if it's tomorrow.
Okay. Declaration by members of any interest pecuniary or other than pecuniary in accordance with the Council's Code of Conduct, etc.
No.
etc. We don't have Helen Lloyd-Smith here, which would have been an issue on the planning. Do you have any others?
7B.
Outlook, yes. Sue for Outlook, that's another. So we understand it, other than pecuniary. We don't therefore have any requirements under the Localism Act, Section 33, for dispensations. A reminder to everyone that the meeting is being recorded for publication on the internet, as we do now, and we seem to have got over the earlier problems, so it does get recorded properly, we hope. We're also hoping that we get less background noise by separating the table that the microphone's on and putting a cloth under it, so we'll see how we get on there. Right, before I open the public session, two things. Firstly, I wanted to make some comments on last month's public session, and then what I aim to do is we've got an item under correspondence, which was an email from Miriam, and Miriam might have to leave early tonight. I know the sports club meeting tonight, so I was going to deal with that straight away afterwards so that she had the opportunity, if we get through that, to listen to it. I have the opportunity to shift agenda items around, and then we'll go into the public session proper. Okay? So, public session last month. My feeling is that despite all efforts to clarify the role the public is invited to play during public sessions, a degree of confusion or intentional misunderstanding is still happening, and I'd like the indulgence of councillors as I return to this problem once again. At the public session last month, Mrs. Lewis took the opportunity to make a number of points. Unfortunately, despite various efforts by me and my predecessor to offer guidance in the past on the latitude the council grants to residents at its meetings, it was clear this has still not been taken on board. So let me set this out even more clearly using examples. I've been helped in this by listening to the recording of last month's session and the comments Mrs. Lewis made. First, she in this case through here refers to Mrs. Lewis. She referred to the, quote, the democratic rights of others, unquote, and she claimed to be agreeing with Roger Parker's own previous statement, but he didn't say that. He only spoke of, quote, those who quote their democratic rights, unquote. So let me be clear. Respondents have democratic rights at election time, but the council meeting is then representative democracy by councillors. The public session is an opportunity for residents to make points, subject to the chairman and council standing orders, but it offers a degree of openness, not an extension of democracy in any way. In like manner, Mrs. Lewis's reference to members of the public, quote, having their right to speak, unquote, is miscast. We give them an opportunity within bounds, but no right exists. Mrs. Lewis complained that, quote, the chairman, i.e. me, was not giving me, that's her, the information that I, her, required in order to make an informed decision on how the parish council were dealing with the matter, unquote. This indicates an underlying misunderstanding by Mrs. Lewis of her position here as a resident and as a regular attender at council meetings. She is not and will never be some kind of super referee of council activity or decisions. If she wishes to draw the attention of the council to what she believes might be errors of law or procedure, then she can do so. But the council will take on such matters and decide them as it wishes. As a resident, she is not the arbiter of council activity. Councillors are. She went on to say, quote, the parish council are, she stressed the are, the parish council are accountable to the public, whether they like it or not. And she later repeated this as, the parish council is, again her stress, accountable to the public for their decisions, she included that this time, whether they like it or not. Apart from the loaded innuendo she throws in here, there is no disagreement that the council is accountable to the public every 4 years. But between times, and more importantly, it's accountable under a morass of legal provisions on which we take advice and training as required. What we are not accountable to is Mrs. Lewis's personal view of what she believes, for whatever reason, the council should do or not do, even if she gets a small coterie of like-minded residents to agree with her. Next, Mrs. Lewis returned to another old favourite of hers, this parish council's code of conduct. She complained that we haven't adopted, quote, the Kent Code about showing respect to people, so therefore that gives us, her, a problem when we wish to complain, unquote. And then she said, quote, you have cut it down to the bare minimum, unquote. And she has, she said, quote, raised issues with the monitoring officer on this in the past, but it seems what you've done is not unlawful, but it does mean that we have a parish council that actually don't have the normal code of conduct for their behaviour, and I find that unacceptable, unquote. As Mrs. Lewis confirmed after she consulted Ashford Borough Council's Director of Law and Governance, who is this council's monitoring officer, what we, the parish council, have done is, quote, not unlawful, unquote. In fact, it complies with the Localism Act 2011 that brought in the current regime for codes of conduct. Let me quote from that Act, Section 27, Sub 2. In discharging its duty under Subsection 1, a relevant authority, which includes parish councils, must in particular adopt a code dealing with conduct that is expected of members and co-opted members of the authority when they are acting in that capacity. A relevant authority that is a parish council, that's 3A, may comply with subsection 2 by adopting the code adopted under that subsection by its principal authority. So a parish council is entitled by the law that requires it to adopt a code of conduct to write its own, but it may, if it wishes to, adopt that of its principal authority. Note this would appear to mean Ashford's code, not Kent's. Note also that while Ashford can adopt whatever form of words they want, so long as they meet the requirements of the Act, they are not given a specific invitation to adopt Kent's code, and nor are we. I would add that Mrs. Lewis is agitated that our code has no extraneous material beyond that required by law, except that, unlike some others, we do specifically spell out the mandated centrepiece for all such codes on the face of the document, namely the Nolan Principles, together with a brief explanation of each. This goes further than the strict legal requirement, which is only, when viewed as a whole, for the code to be, quote, consistent with the Nolan Principles. I noted then, when looking at another parish council's code, which clearly follows a hand-me-down version, that it's filled with a lot of inapplicable legal boilerplate for larger authorities and has put reference to the Nolan Principles, which are the key to the Code of Conduct requirements, into an annex. But then that important annex failed to appear in the published version. Because this council started with a blank sheet of paper when writing its code in 2011, it did not prejudge the new legal environment set by the Localism Act by adapting a code from the previous arrangements of the Standards Board and all the rest. That had been swept away in 2011 because it was recognised by the government as not working, and it had paralysed councils across the land with spurious and expensive complaints between councillors and members of the public. We had no reason then to want to embrace a discredited system when we no longer had to, and subject to my colleagues, we don't wish to now. Lastly, across the brief statement Mrs. Lewis made, she used the terms, quote, totally unacceptable, unquote, not acceptable, unquote, and, quote, I find that unacceptable, unquote. She is, of course, entitled to reach whatever conclusions she wishes about the council and its conduct, but I need to give her notice that the council unless colleagues disagree with me, has no desire to keep listening to them. She also said, quote, if you have an issue with an individual person that can be dealt with that individual person, unquote. My feelings entirely, and I hope Mrs. Lewis meant it. Now, that's all I have to say on the public session issue from last month, and we'll get on to that shortly. Now, the other thing I wanted to pull forward was the response to Mrs. Lewis's email that councillors had during the month. And this is on the long-standing and vexed issue of the criticism that began with Mrs. Walton, Mary Walton, on whether we were following the legislative requirements under the Crow Act, Section 85. And after my long explanation last month, when the council were comfortable that we did not need to do it, we're not exercising functions, we got an email from Mrs. Lewis criticising that, and so what I want to do is come back on that email, which you've all seen, and then I'm hoping we can put this behind us, not once and for all, but the last time and for all. So this is about commenting by the Parish Council on planning applications that come to us for consultation, like we have a couple tonight. It's been put to us repeatedly by Mary Walton that commenting when consulted on planning applications is a function, a quote, this is function in quotes, this is function as in statutory function, not just function as in a word in the dictionary, is a function of the PC, and therefore the Crow Act, that's Countryside and Rights of Way Act, Section 85 applies, meaning that if that were the case, then the Parish Council must by law have regard to the purposes of the area of outstanding natural beauty when considering its response to Ashford Borough Council on a planning application. The Parish Council has consistently rejected this argument, saying the act of agreeing and submitting comments is clearly not a function, that's the statutory function, although individual councillors will obviously give the AONB whatever weight they deem appropriate to the circumstances when reaching their own conclusions, which we then have to agree between us all. That view was supported by the advisor of CALP when asked, that's Kent Association of Local Councils, when asked the question in late 2017 by me. At the May 2018 meeting, it was agreed to seek written confirmation of that view, at which point the advisor that I'd spoken to before passed it on to their specialist planning advisor for a second opinion. That response in writing confirmed the Parish Council's established position that such responding on a planning application consultation is not the exercise of a function. That was all gone through last month. So I reported all that last month and added by way of support for the specialist advice we'd received that a list of functions carried out by local authorities appears in legislation passed in 2000 with 15 subsequent amendments since that time. None of those declared functions covers what we do, and none of the 27, later amended to 31 functions that deal with planning matters are in any way analogous to what we do, which is giving a non-binding opinion as opposed to reaching a regulatory decision, which is the business of the planning authority, in our case Ashford. I also specifically mentioned that the 2000 regulations covered all levels of local authorities, as that is stated clearly on the face of the regulations. Regulation 1 sub 2 states these regulations apply in relation to local authorities in England. The council agreed in response, this council agreed to the report in June that the situation was clear, our responses are not a function, and the consideration we give to the AONB when deciding our responses will remain a matter for councillors' discretion. Not subject to Crow, Section 85, although in practice it may be a little different because we can take account of it if we decide to. Now, Mrs. Lewis has written to the clerk since the June meeting challenging the decision challenging the decision the council took and criticising the brief that I gave the council. She chooses to ignore the specific written advice we received through CALP and instead addresses the reference I made to the 2000 regulations. They had been raised by me in two contexts. First, that our responses to consultation were not listed there as a function, and second, that none of the functions listed were in the nature of the non-binding opinions that we're able to offer. In contrast, the functions there are all definite decisions or actions taken by those whose decision is decisive. Mrs. Lewis says that the 2000 regulations only apply to principal authorities, which we can take to mean district, borough, county, metropolitan and unitary councils, and therefore it was misleading for me to have quoted them. As mentioned earlier, the regulations clearly state up front in Regulation 1.2 that they apply, quote, apply in relation to local authorities in England, unquote, and Local Government Act 1972, Section 270, subsection 1, as amended, defines, quote, local authority, unquote, to mean, quote, a county council, a district council, a London Borough Council, or a parish council, unquote. So is that QED? Well, despite this, it appears the situation has been confused by draftsmen in the department at that time, what was then the DETR under John Prescott. The Local Government Act 2000, which authorised the Minister to make those 2000 regulations, although they have their own force once approved by Parliament, adopted a non-standard definition of local authority for Part 2 of that Act, only Part 2, which is where it opens up the subject of the 2000 regulations that we've talked about. Yet without any reference to this alternative definition, i.e. specifically excluding parish councils, that does not appear in the regulations. It's therefore open to a degree of doubt which interpretation should apply, though having looked at the Act, I am inclined to believe that the underlying intention of the department, the DETR, although badly expressed and with a healthy dose of confusion, was the one put forward by Miriam, i.e. that the regulations were not intended to apply to parish councils, despite what it says on the face of those regulations. Such is the standard of some of our legislation and some of our lawyers in the department. How much does that matter? As I said earlier, those regulations appeared to support our case in two respects. First, in the broad context of what things are declared to constitute a function, none of which bear any comparison with our purely advisory role, and secondly, because what we were able to do in submitting our non-binding opinion was not listed there as being a function. In the light of this revision to the applicability of the regulations, however, the first of these two remains true, the second of them is no longer conclusive. Although it seemed OTOs previously, in the light of all the other supporting evidence we discussed last time, and not forgetting also the written materials online from Chichester DC and Rother DC, we've now taken further advice from the senior planner in charge of the planning application process at Ashford. She has replied in writing to support this council's position and its reasoning, and I quote, in short, the LPA, that's Local Planning Authority, which is Ashford, in short, the LPA carry out a statutory function in determining planning applications. In doing this, then we do have to consider the relevant statute, government guidance and policies. Whilst the parish council is a statutory consultee in making comments on planning applications, it's not carrying out a statutory function where consideration needs to be given to statute and so on. There's nothing wrong with you making reference to the relevant statute, policies, etc. to support the comments of the parish council, but you are not duty bound to. I therefore agree with your, that's ours, view in your 8th paragraph. And I'll tell you what the 8th paragraph said from me, that she has agreed. My question to you is therefore this. Do you, as our principal and planning authority, share our view that responding as a parish council to a statutory consultation on a planning application, if we choose to respond at all, is not the discharge of a statutory function and therefore not covered by CRO Section 85? It is, of course, on our side, the exercise of a statutory power, but it's not a duty. On your side, you have, of course, a duty to consult us if we wish, and a duty to take account of what we say, but not necessarily to follow it slavishly or at all. We think that still leaves it as a function for you, but not for us. And she agreed with all of that. Before closing on this, I should add that Miriam Lewis attached 4 documents to her email of criticism referred to earlier, and I'll take a moment to deal with them. A document from the Association of Council Secretaries and Solicitors entitled Powers and Functions of Parish Councils, has a table entitled List of Parish Council Powers, followed by 3 columns named Function, Powers and Duties, and Statutory Provisions. The row Miriam draws attention to has under the column Function, headed Function, Town and Country Planning, and then under Powers and Duties, Right to be notified of planning applications, and under Statutory Provisions, Town and Country Planning Act 1990, Schedule 1, Para 8. The relevant part of that provision reads, a local planning authority, that's Ashford, who have the function of determining applications for planning permission shall, if requested to do so by the council of any parish situated in their area, notify the council of any relevant planning application. That's all that provision is, which is what we've always said. Note the use in the Act of the term function in respect of the duties of a planning authority in determining applications. Now, in respect of the use of the word function as a column heading in that reference document, it could as well have read topic. Were it to be taken as meaning a list of statutory functions as opposed to functions in the dictionary, then it only identified our, quote, right to be notified, not any response we may make to the planning authority. Moreover, the whole thing appears in a table headed List of Parish Council Powers, as I said earlier, and it goes far wider than those things that might be functions for parish council. So, for example, the list that was referenced includes the power to accept gifts under Local Authority Act 1972, Section 139, and that cannot under any stretch of the imagination be construed as a statutory function. So we can rule out that document as an authority with a small a. Another document that was enclosed was from Natural England, entitled England's Statutory Landscape Designations, a practical guide to your duty of regard. And it sets out to explain who the duty applies to, what's meant by duty, what functions the duty applies to, and what's meant by have regard to. There are no disagreements in that until it refers to earlier guidance from DEFRA in 2005, which Mary Walton has referred us to before, and now also referenced by Mrs. Lewis, in trying to explain what functions the duty applies to. And this English Nature document concludes, drawing on the DEFRA source, that, quote, the duty applies to all decisions and activities that may affect land within an AONB, unquote. Unfortunately, both DEFRA and our Natural England leap ahead of the legal provision because the duty in the Crow Act explicitly applies and only applies in that statute to, quote, exercising or performing any functions. DEFRA and Natural England are right to say that this goes wider, as they do, than, quote, just environmental or countryside issues, unquote, and it covers anything that affects land in the AONB. But the duty in Crow is still restricted to the exercise or performance of a function, and in that respect, both the reference pamphlets substantially overstate their case. Lastly, a document from North Wessex AONB entitled Guide to Community Planning sets out guidance that might assist in the formulation of community-led plans within their AONB. To the extent that such guidance might have helped voices, although it isn't clear, as the group suggested little or nothing to which this guidance might apply, it still isn't relevant to the statutory duty placed on the Parish Council by Crow, Section 85, which of course applies when we perform functions, but responding to planning applications, as I've shown, is not a function. So to conclude, and in light of the unequivocal advice on the matter from our Principal and Planning Authority, which also coincides with that we've received from CALP twice, plus various documentary sources, I suggest that the Council now restates its conclusion from last month that the matter is settled in the terms we have been advised, and that we leave it finally there. Are people happy with that around the table?
Yes, Chair.
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much. I'm sorry to spend 25 minutes apart from the introductions going through those two things, but I think they were important to save us time in future. So now it is time for me to open the public session, and as always we will start with the planning applications. So is anyone here to talk about 39 Swan Street? No? Does any councillor want to Well, we can't ask anyone anyway, there's no one here. So we'll move on from that. We can talk about ourselves. The other one where we definitely have people here is Cullen Farm Buildings in Mathen Road. Provision of one number tourist accommodation cottage, including change of use of land and parking. Is anyone here to talk about it from the point of view of the applicant? We know that you had an email saying he wasn't available. Is anyone else wishing to speak from the point of view of the applicant? No? Okay. People wanting to speak. You're the neighbour, as I know, right, so yeah. I think it's only fair for you to start.
Okay. Happy to do that. So I'm Spencer King. Sarah and I own Cullen's Cottage, which is immediately next to the application site. So this is an application for exactly the same proposal as was withdrawn about 18 months ago. If built, it will stand out in the landscape, harming the rural character of the countryside, harming the setting and the amenity of historic heritage assets next to it, and will introduce an identified road safety hazard into the area. We will be opposing the application on two grounds: firstly, planning policies, and secondly, on road safety. So briefly, on the planning side, there are at least 16 policies directing refusal on this. And unless you wish me to do so, I will not go into these, but I would ask that you consider one point of principle. The site is in the High Weald area of outstanding natural beauty. It's next to our 600-year-old Grade 2 listed medieval cottage, which is included in Kent's historic environment record as a medieval farmstead. It's next to the 700-year-old medieval Nell Dam, and the earthworks below this straight section of the road from Potman's Heath over to Newenden. Ashford have recently included this in their heritage strategy as a notable asset in the south of the borough. The site immediately adjoins the Rother Levels and adjacent Woodlands Kent wildlife site. It's within the area that Ashford are currently promoting as a dark sky area in its draft local plan. It's difficult, therefore, to imagine a more sensitive location than this. These 16 policies dictate refusal in order to protect such assets unless there is a significant public benefit which outweighs the harm from building random individual houses in the LOMB, which these policies envisage. So the point of principle here is, what is the significant public as opposed to private benefit of this case? It's claimed that there is an enhancement in tidying up the site. Granting a planning consent to introduce a highly visible building which would change the character of the location is not an enhancement. Two of the three existing structures on the site are relatively lightweight sheds, which I could not find any planning consent for their construction. Even so, just removing the rubbish that's stacked against them would leave them looking like no different to many other buildings that there are in the locality. The tourist changeover, requiring 2 hours of cleaning a week, makes no meaningful employment contribution. One tourist unit on its own makes no significant contribution to tourism. Tourists come to see the beauty of the AONB. Ruining the landscape with the random isolated houses will be killing the goose that lays the golden egg. There is therefore no significant public good in this proposal to offset the harm to the character of the AONB and the settings of the immediately adjacent heritage assets. It will affect the amenity we presently enjoy. Further, Ashford's policies require for development to be permitted in the OMB. For it to be permitted in the OMB, it should enhance the tranquillity. It's difficult to see how the proposed tourist use could achieve this, and this proposal is encouraging outside entertaining, barbecues probably with outside music, outside lighting and extra car parking. Height of this building will be over dominant to Cullen's Cottage, with overlooking from at least one window, so it will cause harm to the current setting. Turning to the road safety aspect, Ashford was going to refuse this application last time on Kent Highway's recommendation. Nothing has or can change. The proposed access is exactly the same, so it's equally dangerous now as when the Parish Council opposed the last application. Kent Highways based their recommendation on an assumed 40 mph average speed, even though the speed limit is actually 60 miles an hour. Since then, the applicants have put a speed survey on the website which endorses Kent Highway's assumption, as it shows an average speed of just over 40 miles per hour on the 600 plus cars that pass this access every day. The applicants cannot satisfy the current safety standards required for a 40 mile an hour road. We cannot see, therefore, that Kent Highways and therefore the Parish Council can come to a different conclusion this time to the one they came from last time. There have been 6 accidents on this road in the last 10 years, 2 involving serious injury at existing accesses. So in conclusion, if I'm unable to persuade you on planning grounds not to allow on your watch harm caused to your 700-year-old landscape with the loss to those that follow you, I hope you remain sufficiently concerned by the road safety issues and object to this on the same grounds as before. Tourists, possibly foreign, not familiar with exiting on this fast road, represent a significant risk to themselves and any of the 600 plus cars that pass it every day. So I therefore ask you to object to this application.
Okay. Does anyone want to ask any questions of Mr. King?
Not at this stage.
May I thank you for your presentation?
Go on.
May I ask? I went down there the other day just to sort of refresh my memory, if you like, and I could be wrong here, but it struck me that the hedge had been altered quite a lot. It seems to be from when we went, several of us went the last time, and I forget the exact date, but when we went last time, my impression I had was it was pretty overgrown and quite bushy and quite tall, and I don't know if it, I'm assuming it's their hedge and not yours, but again,
Right, yeah.
but they seem to have cut it down considerably and also cut it back into the entrance. Has that work happened recently, or?
The hedge was cut probably a month ago,
Okay.
6 weeks ago. I can't remember it being cut back. I mean, the access is slightly different.
Because
to
it
what
sort of
was
seems to
before.
go in. I sort of reversed in and sat in my car as I did last time, and I thought the sight lines were changed quite dramatically.
No, they're not.
Okay, well that's my impression.
The entrance has changed, but not the side.
The access
Yeah,
has changed.
well I
on
sat
the
there
side.
and the hedge seemed to come back, and I could see much further than we did when we went down last time.
The particular issue on that, why they can't satisfy the safety requirements, is that last time on a 40 mile an hour limit, Kent decided that they needed 90 metre sight lines. You measure the sight lines 2.4 metres back from the curb, and you measure them in either direction to the near side curb. And if you do that left or right, you can't do that over land that's within the applicant's control. So to the left, going towards Rolvenden Lane, goes over the hedge that belongs to Jack Russell, and there is no way that the applicants can make Jack Russell remove that hedge. And in any case, that hedge is an arable hedge, agricultural hedge, and you're restricted in the times in which you can cut the hedge. You can't do it when the birds are nesting.
And has Jack Russell said he's not going to remove that? He has. Is that documented? Or is that...
It doesn't work that way.
No,
I was going to say it works the other way round,
Yeah.
in that the applicants need to get an agreement. So
Yeah.
Jack has said that he was not prepared to sign that agreement.
But just so I can... Kent Highways have stated that the sight lines are not clear.
Kent Highways are waiting for the end of the process before they comment this
Okay.
time.
Okay.
So at the end of the process last time, they stated that the road, based on their estimate, which is now approved, of 40 miles an hour, needs 90 metre sight lines. That's the issue to the left. The issue to the right is slightly different, because before it gets to Alan and Wilma's house, it passes over land in front of our garage. That land belongs to us. It doesn't belong to them. So we would be required to enter the same sort of agreement that Jack Russell would enter into. If I entered into that agreement, or if we entered into that agreement, it would mean we couldn't use our own garage, because we wouldn't be allowed to park our own car outside our own garage, because it would obstruct the sight lines.
So you're slightly stuck, I suppose, in a way, then, aren't you? To improve the safety of you coming out, you'd have to take those measures.
Yeah. No. Why would you do that?
I can understand that. I'm just trying to clarify.
Limit the way in which you can
of course.
use your own
I
garage.
understand that.
You don't
I
understand.
understand. Okay.
I mean, we've used this access for 20 years. So it's not a problem for me pulling up because I know how to do it. I know where the traffic comes and I know how to do it. For somebody that's renting it on a weekly basis, coming from France, looks left instead of right, it's a big problem for everybody that's going past. 600 people a day go past it.
Yeah, I mean, whether they're from France or from
No,
Parish,
I
I
really.
think, actually.
What I'm saying is
Okay.
600 people a day go past, and it's not the people from France that's driving past, it's the person that's putting out from the tourist accommodation that's the issue.
You come from over the border.
Yes, I do. And if I could, I'm Steve Bryant, long time, 4th-generation family of Rolvenden and Rolvenden Lane. If I could just reply to the councillor there, from experience in Rolvenden, it does make a difference if anyone's from Europe, because we've had an accident up there and they were on the wrong side of the road. We've had people done what they're naturally used to. It makes a huge difference. If they're from Hampshire, I would say, you know, not too bad at all. But by the very nature of a holiday there, there's huge interest from France, the Netherlands and Germany, and there is a degree of confusion. And with the sightlines not being good enough, it's a really dangerous spot that people are confused anyway. And with the not being time, as you're pulling out, I think it's a really, really dangerous idea on that respect. The fundamentals of this application have not altered since the last time. And the other thing I'd like to say is that the area of Potman's Heath has a very a special place in the heart of the people of Rolvenden Lane. We join, in fact, you know, the two parishes, and it is an area of outstanding national beauty, and it is a special scientific interest, and it is a very precious site, and I think that to allow this application would detract from the listed building cottage that is Cullen's Cottage. And councillors, I think you have a huge responsibility here in this case, and I would ask you to reject this application. Thank you very much.
Object. Okay, thank you. Anyone want to query that?
Could I just add a point about the hedges, because there is some confusion over the application, possibly from the last time to this time. The supporting evidence statements with it said that they were going to screen the property so that you wouldn't see it to protect the views by having the high hedges, and now they've said they'll cut the hedges down in order to try and help with the traffic. So that inevitably means that the building will be seen. And from my perspective, when you come onto the island, shall we say, there's about 7 roads, I think, that enter onto the Isle of Oxney, and this is one of the ones that comes on, so you rise up the hill. And this is, Cullen's Cottage is the first thing you see after the Nell Dam, over the levels, and it's a very historic and beautiful landscape as you come onto the island. This site used to be part of Cullen's, it was all part of the same site many years ago. It isn't anymore, but it looks as though it's part of the same site. And having a modern building on that site would be absolutely ruining the entrance onto the island from that landscape position. Never mind about what you see from the bridle path that goes along the Rother there and the walks that people do.
Right. Anyone want to raise any queries? Otherwise we go to Mary. Mary, I saw that you had put in a studious response already on the portal.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very concerned about the heritage value of the site. It is, you know, it is an outstanding place. And I just thought I ought to let the Parish Council know that I am in the process of applying for scheduled monument status for the Nell Dam,
Right.
which I think is long overdue.
That's with English Heritage, is it?
No, Historic England. But there are a lot of heritage groups who are concerned about
Is
this.
that the same thing? English Heritage and Historic England, or are they different?
Oh,
They probably changed the name. But
yes,
I don't know.
I'm not entirely sure about that. But there are a lot of heritage groups who are concerned about it. I'm in touch with them. The Council for British Archaeology is ringing back tomorrow. I'd suggest that just at the moment the Parish Council doesn't really have enough information to decide whether to support or object this planning application, because there is so much in the pipeline at the moment. if we do get granted scheduled monument status, which I think is very probable,
For the dam.
for the dam,
Right.
it
And how
means
far
that...
is the dam from the site? I
Oh,
haven't got
they're
that
very
in my mind.
close. But
I mean,
if you have
50
scheduled...
metres or?
It's probably 150 metres.
Right.
If you have scheduled monument status, that of course affects planning applications
Sure.
within proximity
Yeah.
of the monument. So,
As indeed, of course, the Grade 2 listed does, but it's always a little bit flexible as to how far it has to go.
well, the two have to be seen as you know, one archaeological site. You've got the dam built in the 1330s, and then you've got this medieval hall house built, obviously, to overlook the dam, to oversee any, repairs, and to keep a check on flood levels. So the two have to be seen as one complex. And to build a modern house in between is
They are in each other's setting, I think. Is the
a very strange idea. I'm sure the Parish Council will share my concern about our heritage assets and my wish to protect them. If anyone wants to read any more about the Nell Dam, the definitive paper is in Archaeologia Cantiana 1985, which is online. It's called Developments. I don't know what it is. It's called Developments in the Lower Rother Valley up to 1600, and it was written by all of our great friend Jill Edison, who lives locally, who is the absolute authority. She started the Romney Marsh Research Trust in the 1980s along with Barry Cunliffe, and she remains the world expert on the Romney Marsh, and in particular the Nell Dam. So do please read it. That's 1985, Archaeologia Cantiana, Developments in the Lower Rother Valley. You'll see
Thank
what
you.
I'm talking about. Many people don't know it's there, which is totally forgivable. And I tell as many people as I can, what a wonderful heritage we have on our doorstep. I think what is less forgivable is when people know it is there, to pretend that it is unimportant.
I think if I could add to that, you would know it was there if you stand in our garden, because it's highly visible from our garden. You look across the levels, across Potners Heath Channel, and you see the line of the Nell Dam running across where the road bends going towards Wolverhampton Lane, and then across into Newenden.
Which I take it is not very high now because it has no hydrological significance, it has archaeological significance.
No, in fact, when it floods down there, you have indraft upstream of Blackwall Bridge.
All
And
right.
when it floods, the Nell Dam, built with spades and wheeled carriages in the 1330s, it still holds back the water.
Still now.
Despite peat shrinkage, despite all sorts of things, you will find it is still holding back the flood water.
If
It's
you'd like me
remarkable.
to, what I'll send to you is photographs that I took out of our bedroom window in 2014. You remember the big floods in 2014? And then the whole of the levels in front of, from Cummins Cottage over to Newenden was water all along the side of the Nell Dam. So you can see
So
what
that
the
is
Nell,
the other side of the Nell Dam, does it?
it's on
On the
the
road.
Rye side of the Nell Dam.
Right, right.
So the Nell Dam, which Mary knows more about it than me, but my understanding is that the Nell Dam was constructed to stop seawater coming up from Rye. So that picture shows you what that landscape would have looked like 700 years ago. The other side of the Nell Dam was to divert the Rother to Smallhithe. So it was a dual function construction.
Right, does anyone else? Phil?
Thank you for your 25 minutes, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, I'm sorry, I did rather stray on your time.
Well, the reason that you had to do that was because you are being blasted with all kinds of irritable, pernicious attacks on the Parish Council, which are totally unjustified. And I am personally, and I know other people are, totally fed up with all this time that it's taken. And it wouldn't have been that long if you hadn't been forced into the situation, I'm sure. So what that results in is a reduction in the democratic rights of others who would like to speak regularly at Parish Council meetings. The democratic rights of everyone are important in this context, and I would suggest that if the parish council isn't minded to do it, that if Miriam persists in this, she'd be banned from parish council meetings on the basis of infringing the democratic rights of others. This is not a court of law. It's not a court of law.
No democratic rights.
Excuse me, I'm speaking. You don't like other
Just
people
be
interrupting. It's not a court of law, and it's not right that people who have legal minds, which can tangle us up in these awful arguments that go on far too long, should once again, I say, infringe the democratic rights of others. So it should be given serious consideration that if she persists in this pernicious process, which has been going on for years, she'd be asked if she wants to come to parish council meetings and listen, but not talk. That's my first proposal. In Syria, I'm serious about this. The second one is a totally different matter. No, it's not. It's part of the process, actually. AONB land. I was asked by a person in this audience after the last meeting if I had not seen an aeroplane circling over Gatwood, all this beautiful land underneath, and how important AONB is. Very important. We all cherish it. But a lot of that land is arable land, and there are books being published. This is not sentimental slosh. It's scientific research. Bees, arable land which is sterile, will not even support worms. A lot of this is beautiful from the air, but not at the ground level. So there's a whole raft of these books. They're Sunday Times bestsellers, and there's so many of them, I don't have time to read them all, stating the case of what arable land can be if it's sterile, not beautiful.
Okay, thank you.
Very much.
Other people wish to speak? Oh, Miriam, yes?
Well, I was going to try and speak on the planning application. I didn't know that we'd actually finished with that, but...
I didn't realise that was not going to be about the planning application. I don't mind, but I hadn't realised equally, so I couldn't start the clock. But I think Phil was within the 4 minutes anyway on his piece. You're going to talk about the planning, Miriam.
I was just going to talk about Cullens, yeah.
Yeah, indeed. Let's go back to Cullens.
A point
No
about,
time limit on that.
a point about protecting the heritage assets, and your
Right.
point that somehow the policy and law is flexible here. I don't think it is flexible at all. I think the law is clear about the protection of listed buildings. I don't think if you read the Listed Building Act you're going to find a lot of flexibility there, and certainly the MPPF is quite clear, and the inspector brought this up. I spoke on this at the local plan and made the point, and the inspector said to Ashford that they must absolutely make sure that their policy relating to the heritage assets of the borough complies with the law. There's no question about that. There's no flexibility. So I think that's a really important point, that the parish council understand that not only bound by planning policies, Ashford and the MPPF, which are both clear about the protection of listed buildings, but also the Listed Building Act as well. So I don't see an awful lot of flexibility, and this is a particularly fine building, probably one of the finest in Wittersham, and obviously the Nell Dam and the area of Cotman's Heath is probably the finest asset that we have here in Wittersham. So I think that should weigh very much in the council's decisions that they're going to make about this application.
Thank you. Anyone else want to talk about the Cullens Cottage plan? No? So we can move on. Phil's already spoken. We can move on to anyone who wants to talk about other issues. Miriam, I'll start the clock this time.
Well, we had 25 minutes of a a personal attack and a number of things said which are simply not true. But I mean, I certainly haven't got 4 minutes to reply to that. I did ask last time that you would send me, because I arrived late and I didn't hear what you had said. I asked for that to be sent to me. It wasn't sent to me to respond.
It's on the recording.
So I think I shall respond to this separately, because there's so many things that you speak for 25 minutes in a public session with no right of reply. It's very difficult to actually respond now. And I did want to bring up another point on the agenda, and just to clarify, please, about the removal of the trees in the cemetery.
Yes.
I did ask, some months ago now, the clerk about planning permission for the cemetery, and she said yes, they would be requiring planning permission, and she'd spoken to Ashford on this matter. Well, I haven't seen any planning applications go in at all, and so I wondered why the works have started and 4 trees have been removed if you haven't got planning permission. Could I ask why that would be? That you would start the works without planning permission?
Planning permission is for change of use, not for removing
No.
not for removing trees from where we
Those
are.
trees are required to make an access, and presuming that they're to make an access, then I would say that is works for the planning application. You wouldn't remove 4 trees from a line of quite significant trees which were planted presumably when the cemetery was first set up, I don't know, but I don't think you would remove the 4 trees for any other reason than to make an access. So I would have thought that you would need your planning permission before you would remove the trees. What if you don't get the planning permission? You've spent public money and 4 trees have been removed. So what is the council's plans on getting planning permission for the extension to the cemetery?
I think you answered your own question. The parish council's plan is to get planning permission before it can be changed of use from what was, I don't know what sort of field we call it. It didn't have actual apple trees on it, but in effect it was orchard, and it's going to be changed into a cemetery in due course.
Mention is agricultural land.
The clerk can take advice on that, but my understanding is it's got to be done at some point before it becomes a cemetery.
Well, you will need to apply for planning permission.
Oh, we will. Absolutely.
So what
we will.
I'm saying is, why did you remove the trees before you got your planning permission?
Why did we need to wait until we got the planning permission? We've been
Because
assured
it's
we can
part of
have.
the work.
We've been assured we can have the planning permission. I believe in time past we simply haven't applied for it yet.
Okay, that's fine. So you.
We didn't apply for it until we got the land transferred, which was a few months ago. And you make a perfectly fair point at one level, Miriam, but I think that it's at another level. It doesn't lead anywhere. You've got to apply for planning permission before we start burying people in it.
And we do, Mr. Chairman, need to have that facility, and that was voted on in council 2 years ago, and the records will show any member of the public if they choose to spend their time looking at it.
Oh yes, it was all agreed.
For the discussions that we were allowed to be part of, a lot of it was done privately, the cemetery discussions. But yes, I mean, it was obvious that we needed to find another area for burials. There's no question about that. But I would have thought that you would have to see if the land is suitable for an extension first. There would have to be, I would imagine, various tests.
I think we've got the point, Miriam, and Yvonne will take advice, but at some stage we know that she's got to make that application. And she did have discussions with the planners at Ashford some while ago on it. Okay. Mary.
Yeah.
What's different?
Well, as regards the duty of regard to AONB purposes, I'm sorry, I still don't agree, but more importantly, Natural England doesn't agree. Natural England is the monitoring officer. Could I please send any correspondence you've had with Ashford, and could I please send the email that Yvonne kindly sent me on June the 14th to Natural England for their comment? This will require Yvonne to send me the correspondence you've had with the planning officer at Ashford. Would that be all right?
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you can have that.
The monitoring sequence is the AONB unit, Natural England, and then the Minister.
Fine.
Thank you.
I mean, as I've said, we don't need to go around it again. The advice has been absolutely clear.
And it was likewise from Natural England.
Well, Natural England, I explained where I think that their pamphlet goes wrong. And I understand you don't agree with it, but anyway, we've dealt with that for now. You can have that correspondence
Thank you very much.
because it's straightforward. It's a straightforward request. Anyone want to raise anything else? Phil?
Can I just ask if all your 25 minutes of discussion earlier on is going to be copied to Miriam for her to read before she goes to bed at night?
She won't get it on the recording that quickly. It'll be on the recording as on YouTube as soon as the clerk has done it, which usually takes a
She
day
can
or
listen
two.
to that then.
That can take a day or two.
Yeah.
Okay. Can I close the public session then? No, I can't. I've got one other job to do. I have got one other job to do, which is important. Just as well I get reminded. I have a pleasurable job to do tonight, but I enjoy coming to the council anyway, but this is also a pleasurable job. This parish council has been quite keen to take the opportunity to get the to apply for awards from the Kent County Council and the High Sheriff, I think, for people who have been making a special contribution to the village. And on this occasion, we were successful after putting forward one particular individual who everybody knows, and that is Jennifer. She's secretary for various groups throughout the village. I'm reminded that she does shorthand, which is highly sought after. Maybe she can read it back, which is even more sought after. She plays the organ. She sings in the choir. She's been the choir mistress. She's on the parochial church council. She helps a lot with the junior orchestra. She helps with the children and adults alike musically. She's on the Outlook on Oxney committee. She's the press correspondent for the local paper. She was once editor of Outlook. She's vice chair of the governors at the school. She's secretary of Voices. And there's probably several things that I've forgotten. So, plays the violin, I'm told.
Yes.
Well,
There's probably a very nice person on top of all of that.
Exactly.
we can all vouch for that. So what I have to do now is find my way into the bubble wrap.
You were getting bubble wrap. That's a morning taking care of it.
It says the Calp Community Awards Scheme 2018, supported by the High Sheriff of Kent, the Chairman of Kent County Council and the Mayor of Medway. This certificate is presented to Jennifer Maynard in the community of Wittersham. Jennifer is a great asset to the village. She gives her time tirelessly as secretary to many groups, plays the organ, sings in the choir, always willing to help anyone. And it's signed by the High Sheriff, the Calp Chairman and the Chairman of KCC.
Switch it up.
Hooray!
That's one for Outlook on Oxney.
That might come out very wrong because of the light behind it.
Yeah, just against the dark
Somewhere else.
background.
That's good.
How's the curtains? Shove it in the sink and put it. Give it to me, I'll flush it.
Don't be straight out the window.
Yes, there'll be 5 for literally. 5 for literally.
I thought you were the monitoring officer, Job. Cancel.
He's the village hall technical expert.
Doesn't do anything when he's cancelled.
Coming back. Look at this.
I think it's been hacked.
Just cancel, it doesn't make a difference.
That's right.
Well, I'm hanged if I know.
He's never used it before.
I don't use these things.
You know your friends in France.
So watching the semi-final.
You do realise this is being on YouTube?
She takes it down. Right. sandwich.
Is that because it was time for our sedges? Yes. Oh, that's off.
I think it's when you started using your fingers on it, George. Right, okay, can we then carry on with the council meeting, please?
You want to report this properly now?
Yes, that's true.
Yes, you can.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll carry on with the council meeting. So the first thing is to confirm the minutes of the last meeting, which I have got here. Does anyone have anything to say on the first page? Second page? Third page? Fourth page? Oh, thank you, Phil.
Thank you.
Can I have someone to propose? George, and seconded Paul. Everyone happy with them?
Yes, thank you.
Good, excellent. Thank you very much. Give me a moment while I get initialing and signing. Use the same ones. Okay, so we go on from there to matters arising. First one is the ABC policy on parish council objections to planning applications. They said that they'd reply to you within 14 days,
And have they now?
and we're now more than 14 days.
Yeah, yes, even with.
This is the letter to Tim Naylor that has not been replied to by whoever's been delegated to it. Right.
A month.
But they said 14 days, I think. Okay, the other matter arising, if I slip it in here, it's not actually on the agenda, but it is arising from last month, is the email we got from Paul this afternoon talking about the housing issue and the housing and the survey.
Yeah.
That's the word. Survey.
Yeah. Survey.
Right. So Paul's been having discussions since last time about the survey with Tessa something. Sullivan. What we actually agreed last time was to put ourselves on the list, which we did, and we decided that Ashford being impecunious, we wouldn't wait for them to pay. Although I remember Simon Cole did say that he felt they ought to, but it wasn't his budget. So we have agreed to go on the list. I don't think we've agreed to do much more than that at the moment, have we, other than wait for the effluxion of time.
Well, the last time it was basically saying that I came back with the cost, and that was an approximate.
And that's what we talked about. Yeah.
And so my instruction was to go back and confirm the cost and bring enough information for us to make a decision, because these things you can't just order it off the peg. And so Tessa's come back and given dates in October, 4 months' time. And by the time they swing into doing that and be published, we'd be looking at a publication probably in the first quarter of next year. Now, that will then be getting on for 7 years, 6.5 years, I think it is, since the last one, quite a long time. My proposal is that we go ahead with it, but obviously the council need to agree the sum involved. Yeah. I don't know whether there's, and maybe Councillor Burgess can give advice on this, but we did investigate whether there was any money around, but from Ashford, but they're only making one grant a year at the moment for housing surveys. I suspect that's not going to change radically, but do we investigate, but does that then put it back? Sure. Etc. etc. So the principle I would like to propose is that we say this is something that we need to establish a platform of sound data, knowledge and understanding before we can really make any plans for the future, and we need to get on with it.
Yeah. I think the two things that are also in play, which are relevant, but we can make a choice about how we want to play the three of them. One of them is that the 4 houses being built by Ashford for rent up behind Jubilee Fields. now they are actually seeming to be building them after many, many months of faffing about. They will come up at some time soon, and we will get real evidence as to who Ashford finds to put in them. Obviously nothing is ever simple because it depends on how many bedrooms they are and what size family it takes and all that kind of thing, but they are potentially 4 affordable houses in Wittersham, and we'll find out if they find 4 Wittersham families to put in there, or they come from single, whatever it's called.
Well, my understanding is that will be whoever's near the top of Ashford Borough Council's housing list, so that I suspect that could well be not local.
Yes, it's local.
Yeah, it is
They're local, they're not, it's Ashford's, they have to be on, but it is local.
So there'll be local people.
Right.
The first,
So
the first rate at least.
Right.
So occupation.
Okay.
Yeah.
But we were back in 2014-15. We had agreed as a council, and some of the councils weren't there, weren't members then, but we'd agreed that the average build per year requirement was around, was it 4?
4.
4. Well, 4 times 7 is 28, or 4 times 6 is 24. So we are significantly behind, but also I'm not convinced the demand hasn't changed. And the other thing that I wanted to have built into it, and we talked about at the last council meeting, was a way of getting information and data and feedback from the questionnaire that actually established the requirements for the next generation, so that we as a council could make provision for some sort of legacy development.
No, that's entirely right.
Yeah.
When you said the 4 a year, I think we should separate these. We took it as 3 a year, which was in from the old up to 5, which was the Voices survey.
Yeah.
But that 3 a year was to have gentle growth in the village. It wasn't necessarily affordable housing or local needs housing. It was gentle growth in the village was 3 a year, which would of course include any that were built for affordable.
I agree with you, but that with respect, that was the questions and the findings were those people, and there were quite a wide variety from families to single to elderly, and we established from that there was a very real requirement.
Oh, indeed. That's the affordable.
Yes, and what you're saying is that nobody knows whether that's changed. I suspect, but I can't be sure, that given the evidence of other villages that we talk to and the declining ability for young people to come up with a sort of deposit, that requirement is going to increase rather than disappear for some miraculous reason. The borough is incredibly behind in its construction, and that's not going to go away quickly. And we're in this sort of vacuum at the moment where our data is declining in terms of its relevance. It's out of date, and this is an opportunity to approach 2019 with some very clear, independent data we can then construct a proposition on, rather than being enforced on us.
Which is what I thought we already agreed.
Well, so tonight I'm really saying we need to put this to a vote, and I guess, and agree that we can give Tessa O'Sullivan.
Okay. The other thing I was going to just say that was also in play, but it is again one of these things that is not directly linked, but it's it's indirectly linked, which is the inspector's decision on the site for 40 houses or thereabouts, or whatever he comes up with. It may be none, it may be 40, it may be less than 40. Only some of them will be affordable, but as things stand, some of them would have to be affordable. Now that is the opposite end of the telescope from the survey. Of course, the survey is saying how many people think they need, and this is to do with the supply, not the demand. But those things are all in play at the same time, and they're all kind of loosely linked as to do with housing.
Yeah. I should say I was slightly concerned with the form. If you look at the form, you were talking about further ahead. It talks about the next 5 years.
Yes.
But I got the impression you wanted to go beyond that, but that's what the form was saying, so you're not going to get...
Yeah, I think there's an opportunity to... That form is a sort of a template that they're currently using, but I've already said that we would want to put something... And so there is a degree of flexibility in that. But that was to give us an idea of so rather than them... They've got a tried and tested approach, rather than reinvent the wheel each time. But each time is a separate location. So there is an element of tailoring, both in terms of the rural population age profile and demographics, as well as the particular requirements on that. But they are recognised as the county's the authority on that.
So
I'd like to go back and colloquially bag the slot.
So can we get together, the alterations that, who's going to decide on the alterations that need to be made to this form?
Well, I think we can do that tonight, can't we? That we can take a decision that what we want to do is make sure that there's a question in there that reflects the next generation requirements, and of course that's almost certainly going to be answered by their parents. But actually that's really the only opportunity we've got to gather that. And I think that what we should do is go back to them and say, yes, we want to purchase that survey and we want to make sure that it contains that.
I would have thought the next stage of that would be physically having a conversation with whoever's doing it, with ourselves.
Yes, to tailor it accordingly. Yes. Yes.
We're not just filling a form in and then they come and do it.
No.
We're going to talk about
I think there's got to be a discussion because there'll be local needs.
So, I can't remember now who our housing team was. There was you, Colin, I know.
I think we abandoned it.
Oh, we abandoned it.
We abandoned it because it was me.
Okay. That was a good reason for abandoning
I'm very happy that Colin leads the initiative.
I thought you might say that.
But I will offer to help.
Yes.
Broker that.
I mean, when you think about it, it was Paul and I, along with a member of the public, that we came back quite enthusiastic about what other parish councils are doing and which parish councils had managed to get money out of local authorities.
Indeed, I understand.
None of which was Ashford.
No, I understand. So it must have a load left.
That is something that I think we must challenge.
Unless we see to Tunbridge and Malling, that might be a bit of a challenge.
The interesting thing is that Ashford is spending a huge amount on building at the moment. It's in Ashford generally, but they are spending a load. Because we keep being told by the leader how much excellent work they're doing at establishing their income for the future. In the commercial territory.
Well, his very latest bulletin talks about
housing again.
However, I think
so. Do the two of you want to get together with Tessa Sullivan to sort this form?
Tessa's okay to get up. Yes.
If you want anyone else.
Yes. I think the three of us would be very what Leslie's not saying but implying, the three of us could get together on this, and I think we should progress the situation.
Indeed, and you wanted to say something as well?
Right. It's just experience that I've got over the years, having gone through the last one as well. I just wanted to.
Okay, well, that's
so you want to be involved?
Yes.
Delighted.
Well, it's just
You will be delighted for you to include
so,
you quite happily. But I think we need to proceed with it.
Okay, an ad hoc working party on housing and survey.
I think the village needs this at this time.
Absolutely, I think personally, as important, and it is very important about maintaining our historical stock.
Yes.
All right.
It's just as important.
Paul is saying that we need to settle the thing that we will do it in order for him to get the slot.
Yeah.
Are people comfortable with that for the 1170, and we get the back, I think, and then we get the back.
Yes.
But
you want to propose?
But you must get this form sorted in time.
Paul, are you proposing? I'll second that.
Okay, and we're all right for that? Okay.
Yes.
You must get the form done first. Don't let that drag on. I know we're in some already.
And the covering letter's got to be done.
Covering letter's got to be available. Okay, right, we'll look forward to hearing what you come back with. Right, so we're off of matters arising, and we come to the first planning application, which is 39 Swan Street, the erection of a 2-storey rear extension, which is down here as a resubmission of the previously approved scheme in 15/00141, and I looked it up on my spreadsheet and I found that was previously granted in 11 as 996. So this one seems to be forever hanging on, but we have supported it in both previous occasions. And it was granted originally by Ashford, they just haven't got round to building it. So we have any reason not to support it? We're all happy?
Yes.
So we support that, thank you. Now we come on to Cullen's farm buildings, which we've heard about quite a bit tonight. In 2016, 646 came in originally for 2 cottages, and it was objected to and refused. It was revised to 1 cottage, and it was objected to and refused. I think I've got that all correct, Mr. King. Objected to by us, I mean.
Yes.
And refused by Ashford.
No. The second one. It was originally two. Ashford negotiated with the developer, reduced to one, and one was subsequently withdrawn in the face of a certain refusal from Ashford on the basis of traffic.
Yeah, strictly withdrawn. Right. Who wants to start us off on this?
Well, it does appear that we perhaps, or I certainly, need to see further information about Meldown and the.
I've looked at I've looked at the situation. I read some notes from the individuals who have made comments this evening. I've also been to look at the road situation. I would have to say that though I wasn't a member of the Parish Council in 2016, my view would be that my recommendation would refuse this application.
George?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been mentioned several times that, nothing dramatically has changed since the last time, and I think the things that we talked about last time, or I talked about last time in terms of ANOB, etc., AONB I should say, and the access, and if we're also looking at what is a significant public benefit, well, it's a detriment rather than a benefit. So I can't see any reason to support it now when I didn't support it before.
I supported it last time, and I actually went down there on Friday. I would like to support it again. I think the buildings are in a terrible state, and I don't think the conversion or the putting a building there is going to cause too much problems to the ANOB. The listed building I think is quite far away, and I did notice that, I think it was Julian Younger commented that maybe some new hedging could be put to shield the property from Cullen's house, which would help, and I'm sure the applicant may be prepared to do that. The views will still be there, so I'm going to support.
I supported it last time, and I'm inclined to support it again. That my dilemma, I suppose, is twofold. One is in a greater context that we have been, and this is wider than this planning application, I do understand, but we have been, the comment has been made that we don't have any regard for the AONB in our decisions. We don't take sufficient regard. And I think that in a wider context, those points have been made by different parties tonight. And I would say that over the years, I've been a parish councillor, and I read through all the documents we were sent, by the way, and a couple of points there, and I think they're quite important, particularly this. I didn't feel at any stage was, we don't support or take any regard of the AONB, okay? And I think that's quite important. In fact, actually, it was useful to be reminded of the powers that the parish council actually does have, most of which we don't seem to exercise, such as the acquisition of land, the disposal of land, and so on and so forth. I went down there as Sue did because I really wanted to get an up-to-date feel for the place, and I don't think it's cut and dried at all. And I can see different points of view, and I thought Spencer very eloquently put forward that case, and I listened to it very carefully. I also, the gentleman, forgive me, I didn't get your name from Rolvender, but you made that point very, very well. I mean, I might have slightly differing views onto where tourists come from or whatever. In fact, just as a point of reference around here, most of the accidents, the bad ones on the roads recently over the last 24 months, the locals, Peening Quarter the other day, and the lads went there and took out most of the hedge down past the cliff. I mean, they're not the French or whatever. So, but I take your point. That can be a busy road and what have you. But then, if you want a busy road, Poplar Road is probably the classic there, which I live on, which is a complete nightmare. But I've listened to that, and also I was looking at those buildings, and I'm thinking, so and I know this isn't necessarily relevant to planning of a particular planning application, but I'm trying to get it in context with the A and B as well. I'm thinking, so what do? We just let the thing slowly fall to bits? You know, what would be acceptable there? Because someone could buy it and then build some big farm sheds, potentially. You know, they were agricultural buildings, I understand, that are slowly decaying.
Well, I think there's...
I'm sorry at this stage, and I hate to be nasty, but you're not supposed to say...
No, you're now going to deal with things which I would have dealt with if I didn't.
Okay,
That's what you're
well,
going
I'm just trying to explain my thinking behind this. So I find myself in a real quandary, and I think that probably, and this might seem as I'm running away from the situation, but I'm going to change my view from support to I'm not going to I'm not going to pass either way. Is that possible to do? Because I'm abstaining, and partly it's because what you said about some of the information. To be honest, I'd never heard of Nell's Dam or what have you, and I've never heard it raised in the village or mentioned. I happen to think the prize asset in our village is not Nell's Dam from a heritage point of view. I think it's our church, but that's a personal view. And Nell's Dam actually doesn't live in our. Sorry, it's not in our parish. So I'm going to abstain. But I would like to register the fact that I think that some of the suggestions or points of view that are put forward are ones that probably, and I could be wrong here, from a planning point of view, because this is what we have to come back to, when the planner is sitting there, 75% of what we discuss, they don't take any account, because that's not in their job. And I think that this illustrates where we probably have to start to think about how we tackle some of these applications in the future. There isn't a defined architectural norm in our village. You know, we've had planning permission refused on some properties because it doesn't fit in with the normal architecture of the village. Well, I'm not sure what that is, and I don't think anyone is. So bringing all that together, I think that in the context of what people have said about the A and B and taking into regard, I'm going to change my view, my vote, if that's the right way, from supporting it to abstaining from it. Sorry.
Now, you started to muse about the fact that you would rather have more information, but that opportunity isn't open to you, really.
Well, it does cast a slightly different light on it for me, whether or not it pertains to the planner or not. I do happen to think such sites are very important, and therefore I think before I could take a final decision, I'd like to know a little bit more about that. If I can't do that, then...
We've already had an extension on this, it's got to go in tonight.
Right. Again, I can't really make a decision on it. If I have to, I would object, because I can't... I don't want to make a decision without knowing a little bit more about that.
Okay, right, thank you everybody.
So,
from my point of view...
sorry, are you abstaining or objecting?
Well, then I'll abstain if I'm allowed.
Right, so we have got 2 objects, 1 in favour. My position, I think, has been in the past somewhat tied. I can't actually remember what I did last time. I know I was tied that time because I'm generally in favour of seeing things move forward, of seeing the village develop, of getting more happening. I think that the case that's been made, the listed building is important, and it's clearly a very important listed building, although it's not terribly proximate, but it is, we're on fairly flat land. The site itself is a mess, and it's a mess in several ways.
Who caused it?
It's a mess because of what's on it. It's a mess because of the access. It's not the obvious place to put. It's the council meeting, so you're just not allowed to speak.
Oh no, I wondered if I might make a point of order. I'm quite experienced in these matters. It's nothing to do with the case, but it's a point of order.
That's for sure.
Letting the place get derelict and like a tip is not a reason to grant planning. It's nothing to do with it.
I understand that, but I'm sorry to
nothing,
say
whatever.
I have to stay quiet. Okay, I take your point.
There's actually
it is how it is. It's not an ideal place to put a cottage in from the point of view of the access and sight lines and things, any more than, of course, it was an ideal place to put Cullen's Cottage in, but they didn't think of that 700 years ago when the hay carts didn't move 40 miles an hour.
They were only at horse speed.
So I am conflicted, as I say. I think that I have to, I mean, if I vote for it to support, then my casting vote is a support. In fact, I think I've got to object. So, in fact, the councillors object.
Thank you.
With
That's
sadly,
very, it's very appreciated. Thank you very much.
I think that's the way it's got to go.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think,
Okay.
can I just add,
Please do,
just to
George.
say something, going back to the original conversation that we were having about whether it's functional or not functional, those sort of things. One thing that was mentioned, that local planning authority have got a duty to take account of what we say, which I think is why it's important that we have these discussions and we come up with the decisions we come up with. Because whether they attach any importance to it or not, they still have a duty to take
They
account of
have
it.
a duty to take account of it, but they don't have to follow it.
No, I know, but right. So that's why we need to do it properly when we do it.
No, I don't think there's any doubt we've always done it properly, and some of them I go through pretty easily. You know, we say, well, what's it got to do with anybody else? You know, neighbours don't bother. What's it? You know, some of them are actually tricky. This is one of them that has been tricky before, and it's tricky now. There have been one or two others in my time that have been tricky. Not very many.
Can we also say why we're objecting, please?
Yes, that was how.
Yes.
So,
We're objecting because of the. I would suggest, if people agree, we're objecting because of the landscape value.
Yes.
Because of the high value listed building, although it's further away than we'd normally be concerned, I think, but on the other hand it is flat, it's open. And although we leave it to KCC, we do have some anxieties about the access.
But also we don't see it as being a significant public
I think that's a good point.
benefit.
It's not a big enough benefit to go for.
Yeah.
And that is what we're here to do, is to give a local view as best we can consider it.
okay.
All that said, appreciate Sue for standing by it.
Sorry?
I appreciate you for standing by it and supporting it. It's not an easy decision. So, okay, we'll move on then.
Take care.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very
Thanks
much.
for coming.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. So it's payments for authorisation now.
Jennifer, you've got your award, you don't have to stay on.
However,
Is it a long service award?
Duty bound now.
I'll wait till 7 p.m.
Right, so the next thing then is the payments for authorisation. The invoice from Greenleaf Tree Care for £12.50 plus VAT for taking out the 4 trees and doing the stump grinding. We agreed it in advance, it's just to pay the cheque now.
Have you all seen it?
Yes.
Thank you, Miriam, good night.
See where the trees
I've
were.
not been down. Yeah.
See the gap.
Yes. Oh,
See the gap, yes.
They haven't got TPOs on them.
Did we keep
No.
the wood?
It's from what I can
No,
tell.
I asked for that.
No.
Did you?
So what happened?
What happened to
But sorry?
councillors' perks?
Is it off or on?
Oh,
It's on.
it's on.
Is the meeting still going?
Is it
Yes.
Yes.
I want to just those that.
That's the gap.
Yes. I think it goes.
Mind the
That's
gap.
going from as we come
Yeah,
in.
yeah,
That's what you
yeah,
see. So
yeah.
You'll be oblivious to the gap if you're going through it.
And that's from the other side.
Yeah.
So
That's fine.
there's the school, you know,
Yeah,
the gap.
the gap. Yeah. I was consciously wondering, because I went down just around to where, just wondered where it was going to
Yes.
finish up and
Yeah.
that, in relation to the rest of
Clear
in the
it.
relation
Now
to the
we're
rest
going
of
to- now we've got the gap.
So that's where it's been taken out?
I
Yes.
was hoping we might get access to a few of the trees that come down a bit. And then they're down.
So if you come in,
Yeah.
to the centre,
That's the gap. You look at me now.
Yes.
I was thinking, went down Parliament away, just looking at the ideas for
The issue is, if we don't get them,
You've seen it? That's as you come in to look at it.
Oh, I like that.
but you can't do it in advance.
You-
You're not
sorry.
meeting it.
You're doing it. I've got you
That's awful, you can't come in.
No, he's reserved it, he's paying a deposit.
The Saxon came up that route.
Close the door while
It's not.
You got
Yes, sir.
Please.
Sheet too hot.
So,
It's a wooden post.
you're so caring, that's what I like about you.
Oh, that's why I wanted to keep the wood.
Chairman, can you move on?
Okay,
Right, so that was the first payment, £12.50.
Yeah.
Clerk's expenses, these come up very
Yeah.
frequently.
yes,
Yeah.
Can I have a proposal for that? Or did we have a proposal for the, and a seconder for the money? We didn't. So
I'll
the
propose.
trees is Leslie and George.
I'll
for
see
the
it on.
trees,
didn't you agree before?
and everyone's happy.
Yeah.
The clerk's expenses,
Good God.
this is quite minor by comparison. Is everybody happy? Yes?
Yeah.
Okay, that's paid, that's agreed then.
Good,
Then we get on to correspondence. I've already dealt with the first one at some length, as you noticed.
And may I say on behalf of the council, what an absolutely first-class professional job you did.
Yes, I second that.
Thank you. I appreciate it. We look forward to the response.
Is this the appropriate time to make a comment on the whole situation?
You can, it's recorded of course, but you can make the comment.
Yes.
Feel free.
And taking into account what one of the members of the public said, I think we should consider really drawing a line under it and not allowing it to be brought up again.
Sure.
And if Mrs. Lewis wishes to take the matter further, then perhaps she should refer to a higher authority.
This is talking about functions.
Yes.
Yeah, that's actually Mary who wants to do that, and she will come in correspondence. I don't think we want to spend our time here anymore. It'll unfortunately, if it's correspondence, we'll take the time of the clerk and perhaps myself, but we don't wish to keep it distracting us from the things we have to do. As for the other comment that was made by Phil about exclusion from the council meeting is very difficult. With real physical disruption, yes, subject to getting the police involved and all the rest of it probably. I do think, but it's it's one of those things, probably able to exclude her from the public session because it's a sort of half and half of whether it's the council meeting or not. We adjourn the council meeting, so probably she's not necessarily entitled to attend it.
But if we refuse to discuss it,
But that we can certainly do. It's not just refusing to discuss it, it's her not spending her time talking about it. But she did say last time in the transcript that it was to be dealt with an individual. Her exact words were on the tape, and as I said, I hope she means it. If you have an issue with an individual person, that can be dealt with that individual person. So, in a way, she was acknowledging last month that if she's told to stop, she has to stop. I think, of course, last time it was last time in June. May. In May, wasn't it, that she kept saying she kept demanding to know who the advisor was. And I said, it was the advisor. No, I want his name, And it went on like that until I closed the public session, which is what led to the response last time and now the response this time.
I think the point that Leslie's made, and also that Phil Wilcox made, is that, we're volunteers, there's a limited amount of time. We do have this time. It's not just the Parish Council meeting, there's all sorts of other things. We're going up to the housing, George does the village hall, Sue does the app, etc., etc., etc. But we haven't, we're not full-timers on this, and we've only got a certain amount of time. If we are allocating a really significant portion to dealing with Miriam Lewis and all the vexatious behaviour and accusations, and her language is always extreme, right? And you quoted it tonight, and it's there now as a matter of public record. We can't be dealing with that and dealing with some of the other more important issues to a wider audience at the same time. And it's entirely selfish, and I don't mind going on record saying
it gives a bad impression.
And people are put off coming to this. I've had people saying they don't want to come here because they regard it as the Miriam Lewis show.
I know, but even now she's not here, we're still talking about it.
Well,
That's the issue, and
exactly.
it's still
I
taking
thoroughly
time.
endorse Leslie's suggestion there that you're the chairman, you draw the line.
That is my
exactly.
I didn't think that we were going to be back on functions this time. Unfortunately, it did turn out, and blame me for this, that one point I added in was open to considerable doubt.
Yeah.
But to be honest, I really do think that the legislative draftsman was at fault by putting on the face of the regulations something which he could argue was true by cross-reference to somewhere else, which wasn't actually cross-referenced. But it is a standard term. In fact, I even brought with me something today.
Please, can we move? Please,
Can we move on? Yeah, all right.
Because I will minutes that we agreed that that's it.
Yeah.
Okay, good. That's enough then.
Yeah.
Thank you.
7B.
Good. So we then get on to the outlook on Oxney request for donation.
How much?
£927.50.
That's our usual amount.
Sorry?
£927.50.
Outrageous.
Twice a year. Are we happy to make that donation and keep them afloat?
I think
You would like to propose that?
yes, I
Can't
do.
be Sue.
And I'll
Colin,
second that.
Leslie.
Yeah.
Everyone happy except Sue?
Yes,
Yeah.
certainly.
Okay. Hours of wonderful reading.
Carers support, request for donation. Which carer?
Which carers support? Ashford.
Is it Ashford's Carers support?
Well, there's none of us, we didn't declare it as an interest, so there's a relief.
It's this.
Well,
Carers support.
who is it?
Carers support was established in 1994. We provide high quality support to carers from Ashford, Shepway and Swale. We are a voluntary organisation and an independent charity with a board of trustees. Through the Kent Carers Consortium, Kent County Council and the clinical commissioning groups have funded carers support to complete carers assessment and some support services across the area. All services offered by carers support are free. Our primary aims are to support and promote by providing timely and appropriate services to carers from the age of 16 years, whether they care for a family member, neighbour or friend. Our services are tailor-made to identify and meet individual needs of all our carers through a variety of services. We also provide a counselling and art therapy service for all our carers over the age of 18 years here at Norman House. This service is currently funded by ourselves and is at risk if we are not able to seek additional funding for the specialised service. This service has proved to be very beneficial to our carers, and we now have a small waiting list for carers to access this service. Lots of people do not realise that they are carers. They just do the right thing for the people they love and don't expect any help. By providing information, emotional and practical support, we hope to bring our services to these people, easing the stress they find themselves under and helping them to be better equipped for their caring role. We understand that carers often experience a sense of isolation, stress, guilt and anger, and that caring can also be very tiring, stressful, and leaving you battling with your emotions, and not least impacting on carers financially, as a high percentage leave their jobs to continue their caring role. These carers do not receive financial support from the government, only a very small contribution known as carers allowance. This in itself is extremely stressful and can lead to depression. This is where we would like your support, to enable us to continue with this service and to expand this service to manage our waiting list. Without continued financial support from councils and local businesses, crucial services like these would simply be outside our existing contract with KCC. You can help by donating any amount of money by sending a cheque payable to carers support to the address above. We thank you in advance for your support. Your donation is greatly appreciated and will be used to continue and expand the valuable counselling service we currently deliver locally to our carers.
Who signed that, please?
Maggie Portage.
Okay.
And that's Ashford, is it?
Interim Chief Executive
Yes, it is.
Carers
Yes,
Support.
yes.
Yes.
No.
Yes,
Okay, what do
it's
we
important work.
It's very important. She did come and speak at another organisation I've been involved in recently.
Did you donate?
Pardon?
And did you donate?
We did donate.
Wow.
They're doing a very valuable job under very difficult circumstances. The volunteers are extremely good, and some of them are doing a mammoth amount of work per week, and they've got a waiting list, a considerable increasing waiting list.
Right. Is it a charity?
It's a registered charity, isn't it?
We are a voluntary organisation and an independent charity with a board of trustees.
Right, okay.
No.
So what do we think?
Well, I would support it.
We don't have enough money to make much difference, but obviously they'll be appealing to about 35 parish councils.
What
businesses.
they will do, and a lot of voluntary organisations, etc., because they're strapped for cash and really they're working on a shoestring. Because a lot of the money centrally has been removed completely.
Right, when we gave the money for the marquee for the sports club, we said that we were rather doing in our donation budget, although that doesn't have to be a limit other than the fact that obviously we try and maintain budgetary control. What do people think?
Well, we will get other requests, won't we, as well? So
We were quite early on, we were only in June, July.
what could we afford?
You've got your statement there, which will show you what we.
Donations, we had a budget of 600 and we spent 330 so far. That's the budget for the whole year. So we've spent just over half of it.
And last month we deferred the air ambulance, didn't we, till February to see if we've got money.
Should we do the same with this then?
I would suggest that we make a token right now, because an organisation like this, there's no disrespect to the air ambulance, but they much, and this is an awful pun, but they have a higher profile, but they do. An organisation like this is, in my view, they're the kind of the unrecognised, the forgotten heroes, and I know they will be operating absolutely on a shoestring at the moment. We haven't got much string to offer, but I would propose that even if we made a donation of £100, if they could get that from 35 other parish councils, that £3,500.
If they manage to achieve that would be a lifeblood at this stage, because there is surviving on a day-to-day basis, and the valuable work they're doing in some very difficult circumstances right across the county. I think we should be supporting that.
Are you comfortable with £100?
I can't do any less than that.
Okay,
Yeah.
All right, agreed. That takes us on to the posters from SAFA available at the parish desk. SAFA is the Soldiers, Sailors and Air
Yes, I've got
Force
posters.
Association.
Not volunteers, but
Yeah.
this, that and the other.
I know what SAFA is.
Soldiers.
I've worked with them in the year. Grew up with them.
And
what are they asking for?
just
People to volunteer to help with veterans.
Is the Legion being made aware of this?
I'm not aware of it.
Because I would have thought that would be relevant, at least to make them, include them in the information loop.
That would be logical.
I'll mention it on Thursday when it's our meeting.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I've also had in just like the KCC public right of way that they were wanting to divert. They put an order on, so it's been agreed.
Were you already planted across it?
No, that's where the beans are.
Is that down towards
the river?
The river. It's not near Nellie's Channel, is it?
Nell's
Dyke?
Nell's down.
Nell's down.
I'm sorry, no, I thought that's why you were just stirring.
Well, I
There's got dykes in the downs, clearly.
Okay.
Step on that twice.
Do you want to raise
I'm glad it is such historical interest.
Okay,
so piece of land,
so
I
let-
didn't realise.
just ask them for
Exactly what the Legion does this one.
Of course, all these things.
Okay, let's move
It's
on.
about to go
Yes,
on.
please.
Until it went further. Because of the drought.
Went round the island.
Okay, let's
Yeah.
move on.
Yeah.
Working parties, caretaker.
I haven't actually got anything. The grass is brown now.
Yeah.
But it's getting reports of hedges. Please recut my hedge. So that would be.
Well, he's
Please, could you nip round to my place then?
Right.
he's doing the edges, is he?
Finance.
Hedges.
Edges.
Finance, the monthly
That's what it's on.
transaction statement you had.
Who's
put
asking a
out.
question?
No, I'm just asking, are we keeping the round the monument?
He's done that already.
He's done it already,
So
because
he's-
before I went away, it was starting to look a bit.
Yes, he did it, but it's now coming up again.
It's coming.
But he did do it all the way
Yeah,
round.
I'm just wondering, with they've got to that level, we can
Oh,
try to ensure that we keep it down to that level,
Yes.
because it looks beautiful.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
once it starts growing again, you will start getting the concerns arriving.
No, he said it's easy to keep. So.
Yes, right, that's the point.
Okay, the monthly transaction statement you've all got.
Yeah.
Got a spelling mistake on.
Oh, it's two.
Two is
Yes.
Two spelling
Yes.
mistakes.
Donation. Plantation.
I like that.
Where's that?
Yes, two likes it.
Yeah, I do like
That's
that.
Citizens advice halfway.
Yeah, I've got it. Yeah.
Yeah, so
Everyone happy with that?
Yep.
Yes.
Right, good.
yes.
That's a great name for the new facility, isn't it?
Yeah.
Come down to Club Rude at the time of your life.
Okay, next thing is the periodic one, the first quarter.
Yeah.
We've got the caretakers one.
Do I sign that one as well? Caretakers one is part of the other one that I've already done.
Yeah.
You'll note that we've paid CULT for the planning, which would come under items of information, but the planning, introduction to planning, Tenton and I went to.
Yeah.
No.
So I can't do anything with that at
It's
the
doing quite well.
Yes, so first quarter statement.
Okay, can I sign the first quarter statement?
Yes.
Yeah, insurance
Yes.
we didn't allow enough for.
Want to sign it?
Yeah.
Hire a club room that's quite cheap.
Sorry,
We just
it's a fortnight in Ibiza that's the worrying me.
you can't make a fuss, George.
It'll be Club Rude then.
Right. Okay, so we then go on to the planning.
Yes.
The Poplar Road where the fence has been built too high.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
You've had a response which you're going to tell us about?
Yes, they're just. I think it's there really. The matter has been investigated, and in this case, I feel that it is appropriate to invite a planning application to recognise the matter. If an application is received, you will be informed and invited to comment in the normal manner.
Yeah.
If an application is not received within a reasonable period, then it would be necessary to consider whether it is in the public interest to pursue enforcement action. If this is the case, I will inform you of any decision in this respect.
Right. We've had decisions. The Ulster Court Road they granted so long as the access went back where it was. Hope Farm has been granted, and the land east of Tile House for the bungalow was withdrawn.
Interesting.
They had a George there.
Interesting.
Highways.
Right, if I just go on to this one.
It's
This
a single person. There was no reason for the withdrawal of the
No,
application.
we just get withdrawn.
We just get withdrawn. It's surprising. Interesting.
We don't get to
I think it usually means that they can then put in a different version on the same feed.
I thought they might do, but you know.
Right, we've got road surfacing at Stocks Road Junction. You probably have seen the board. They're doing a stop go, which I've already put on Facebook. Then they're going to road surface improvement works on Bean Quarter Road for one day, closing the road between Malthouse Farm and Hope Farm.
Mm.
However, that's where we've got the water seepage
Yes, right.
problem. So I sent an email to lots of people.
Right.
With Mike Hill being one of them, because I thought if they go and resurface it, this water's still going down. However, I did get a reply from Colin Garnham, who said it'd been obviously been passed to him, and he was going to take a look at it. And he came back. He didn't come back to me, so I chased him on it. He came today to say that he looked last Thursday. The water was seeping out of the bank, which was higher than the carriageway at that point. The flow was relatively negligible, and I therefore do not consider this to be a water leak from any supply system. Further downstream, the adjacent land became lower than the carriageway, and it appeared there may have been a ditch within the verge at some point. The adjacent property had a recently refurbished ditch within the verge. The water was confined to the channel line about 100 to 150 millimetres wide for approximately 38 metres. there was no significant deterioration to the carriageway.
Yeah.
To try and alleviate the situation, I dug 4 grips within the verge to try and divert the water back into the verge, and I will monitor this prior to the surface dressing treatment. I shall discuss this with my contractor, and dependent on the success of the grips, this groundwater may not be a problem, or we may need to shorten the site slightly and start at the nursery entrance. In other words, not actually do that.
Yes.
I gave him different reasons why it could be, that different people have said things to me. He did say that he checked with South East Water, and it's not a leak from there. Southern Water don't have any drains there, so it was, you know, they've obviously got their own sewage system, septic tank,
We all have down there.
whatever, yeah. So he ruled those things out. I also, people had said to me that the verge, the ditch had been piped but then blocked, so it wasn't going anywhere. Also that the land is higher, like at Underhill, where when it rains it runs off, but then it hasn't rained for so long. So I gave him all these different things that I'd heard of. But this is what he's come back with. And I've now got, because this was following the notice, they've now come back again with the notice today, reissuing it with the same things. So they are obviously going ahead. So I've done my best.
Yeah. Well done. It seems to me actually, and I think maybe the weather is a bit of a clue, that this is not a leaky mains pipe. This could well be
he said
an underground spring that just seasonally adjusts because it's almost dried up. The Twitterati next door have been agitating that something must be done because in the winter it's like a skid pan and it's dangerous. Well, it is. But the fact is that if it's a natural thing there, then actually I believe it's the landowner's responsibility, isn't it? Potentially.
I don't know, if it comes up in the road, obviously it's the highways.
But it drains off.
Even then, they can, even if it's a spring, it can still be piped downstream to where it picks up a decent ditch.
Yeah.
You've got to remember there used to be Miss Good's cottage down there, which no longer exists. So there might have been something there. We should just pass the entrance to the nursery. Do you remember? I don't know. Do you remember? No. It was bridged over the ditch. The ditch ran through the house, like near the cottage. She was only there in the summer. She used to go to South Africa for the winter. Very
too dodgy on the roads.
She only had a bike.
It's a long way to South Africa.
No. Anyway, I must go, folks. Can I just, if you don't mind, Jim, Tuesday the 17th at 7 o'clock, there's a KCC bus updates at the Homewood School. I don't really know about it.
I was coming to it till they moved it, but now I'm going to be away.
Well, yeah, I know there's one or two cases like that. But I mean, you might, some member that might.
If you look on my Facebook,
it's on there. I don't do Facebook, it's dangerous.
I put it on Facebook.
All those Russian women chasing after you, mate.
Yeah, I know.
Are they running a bus from your
I'll send it to the clerk. There's a very good article on rural transport and the buses that appeared, I think, in The Guardian in the last few days. It's very good indeed. And I'll send it to you because I think it's relevant to that.
Yeah, there's lots of good
Thank you.
articles.
Good night for coming.
So I'm finished.
September.
All right. I take my signal from you.
Take care.
Have a good summer.
Thank you. Oh yeah, see you in September.
Yeah, the winter then, isn't it?
I've came through today, I think, road closure at Acton Lane and Ebony Road to enable urgent drainage repairs at KCC. And that's on the 19th of July.
The day.
When's this?
For one day.
For one day.
So Acton Lane's closed.
Yeah, down to.
Can I say something? Is this appropriate time to bring something up about Acton Lane and the junction with Stocks Road?
Highway.
Well, another crash. Yes, another crash. And,
Another.
we've had several there, and invariably, Ryan and I go rushing out to help.
There was the motorcyclist about a month ago, wasn't there?
Yeah. It's so dangerous, and it's not our hedge, I hasten to add, because we've been all through that. There is a slight bend in the road.
Yes, there is.
And the traffic comes up there far too fast.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's appropriate for me to say this, but I really feel that it should be looked into as a suitable area for, what do you call it, road
Calming.
Yeah.
I tell you what we should do actually is long-sighted. We just move the village boundary to Acton Lane, and that would solve two things. We could put in proper speed controls, and we also have a whole stack of land that we could build social housing on in the village envelope.
Right.
And by the way, one day it will happen. Sadly, I don't think it will happen well, we could start with stocks. It won't happen probably in my lifetime, but that's how you do things, isn't it? You acquire the land. What about when we moved here, opposite coming out of Acton Lane was a pole with a big mirror on it.
That someone bashed into that and it's never been replaced.
Is that Tim's? Was that Tim Piper's?
He did put one
Yeah,
up, and then there's been loads of these mirrors put up at junctions.
But that particular one, if it's him, could we not ask Tim? Could we not write and say, could you please put it back up again?
He doesn't want it back.
Well, I would have thought so, because some of that heavy machinery coming out.
It's his tractors that knocked it
It's his tractors that, but if he's got a vehicle coming out of your road and they collide, then typically it's the emerging vehicle that's at fault, unless they can prove that the vehicles on the main road were doing over 60 miles an hour. So actually it's in his interest to safeguard that. But I found when we first moved here, that was vital to see.
Yeah,
now,
I thought the council had put those up because they've got them all up.
Private land.
It may be one of those things that we might ask Kent Highways to look into what measures they want to could put in place to slow the traffic down. Because there are, on the road to Sandhurst, for example, there's one corner, it's within a 60-mile limit, but it says there's a sign saying slow down, because it's a junction. So a flashing sign. So things like that.
One of those where you see going into a lot of villages is where they sort of put a false
chicane. A chicane, yes.
Yeah, well, we're too far out.
Say you're too far.
That's what my tongue in cheek, but I mean it. You can move the boundary.
Okay, let's just try and move on then. You could have a talk to Tim Piper because you know him, and see if he'll put it back up.
I'm not always on the best of terms with him.
Oh, you're not on the best.
I think that
not always.
I can follow that.
My suggestion is
we'll leave Yvonne to do that.
Right, so could you put the mirror back?
Yes, it's so we
Could we do it on
understand there was a
behalf
mirror
of the
there.
council?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I take your point about the accidents. Can count those accidents anyway? Well, they're supposed to. The police report them and all the rest of it.
Still on highways, coming into the village from Peening Quarter, the 30 mile an hour sign is obscured.
Yeah.
Basically, the hedge is grown over. So half could shimmy up and drop back. And on the other side of the road, which is you can see the 30 mile, at the base of that, the land is crumbling. I mean, it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. The bit that's been bitten out by some giant monster on the side, it's outside the markers, isn't it?
Yeah.
And we have reported that.
Yeah.
And it's getting worse and worse. And if you're on a push bike, as I am, it's just you have to swerve out into the middle of the road. It's happened to me the other day. And I suddenly noticed it at the last minute because the sun was in my eyes. Anyhow,
a giant monster.
I've also reported after the accident
It's a
down
female
in
monster.
Quarter Bend.
Just can he work it about you?
Just a minute.
Sorry.
Which one?
After the accident being in Quarter Bend, obviously that last one before you go up down straight with the chevron, has been
that's right.
It's laying down, so I've reported that as well.
Okay. So, public rights of way.
Vegetation has now been cut by the contractors, and I've checked most of them. I would say it's been done adequately.
No.
It's not wonderful. The one along the gill that goes from the beginning of the gill down towards the river, there's a tree, branches right over. I managed to get underneath it, but I don't think my walkers will be able to, so I reported that. No way. And you won't like it.
Okay. I won't go that way.
Go over
for it. That's what I'm thinking.
Now the trouble is branches, you can't even
take a saw.
No, it be so, isn't it?
Open spaces.
Open spaces, well, I still have to find out where they
Yeah,
are.
they are. Right.
And Alan's now on holiday.
They're wide open. Okay.
Very open, I think, at the moment.
Right, okay. Cemetery and churchyard, well, you've seen the trees.
But you did consult with Murray before.
You do need to put the planning application in, but there's no great rush. I don't think
No,
that
no.
we've not done anything that requires it. She was just, I mean, she was quite right to point it out, but that's enough said. Reports for noting from representatives on the outside bodies. It's George's Village Hall Committee.
Yes.
The light has gone.
It's still there, it's just not working. To be accurate.
It can only be recycled
Good
once
point
full
on
now.
that there, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah, we have ordered another one.
Okay. Anything else?
We've got quotes to have the roof fixed where the two buildings join together, where that storeroom is, where it's like Niagara Falls when it rains. So we've got quotes. We're getting quotes from that. I've got a quote to have this ceiling painted in a brighter colour, have it sort of cream or white, so get a bit more light in here and make it a bit more user friendly. We're also trying to get quotes to get those two potholes fixed, but no one seems to be that interested in doing them because it's not a big enough job really. So that's why I keep moving the bin over to try and make people move slightly along each time they come in.
Make it bigger.
And on the car park, what we've decided to do, me having spent the last 6 months sticking labels on people's cars saying this is a private car park, don't park here, we've now decided to go totally the opposite way, and we're opening the gate at 7:30 in the morning and closing it at 7:30 in the evening unless there's a function on, and encouraging people who want to park in the car park
and get them off the road,
the traffic off the road. And I'm going to contact the school and say to them that if there's any events on at the school that they need extra car park. Not that people will walk this fast distance from here to here, but it will be available for people to use. So again, it will take, and for weddings, for the church, all things like that, it will be available to be used. So.
Between
7:30 and 7:30.
Do you have an opener and closer then, George?
Yes, the Alan, Vic's husband.
He is the church
keeper of the keys.
I'm not.
But he does the church as well.
He does. I've noticed that in his recent weeks there's been more and more cars and more difficulties. I know the school's a problem.
Was, I think, put in by the previous regime because they didn't like the kids, but the kids will climb over the gate anyway.
No, it wasn't them. It was older ones in cars that were using it as their space for drug exchange and things. But they just got their own and do it now. So it doesn't have any.
I think that's very sensible, George.
So that's our latest.
Nice thing to do.
Can I ask a question of our village hall representative? I haven't brought it up before, but at some stage you were going to come back and we were going to tackle the whole Wi-Fi.
Yeah, we did have that on the agenda for a previous meeting, and Steve Schuriger is looking into it.
All right. Well, tell him he doesn't have to do anything by August, because our next meeting is not until September.
Okay.
And when I see him, I'll tell him that.
Yeah, well, you could remind him.
Right.
Send him an email.
Okay. Next planning meeting we don't need unless something comes up.
Yes, which, well, of course, it
depends on August. Yeah, you'll be
around the
anyway.
planning officer.
Otherwise, we're September. I'm away, by the way, from this Friday for fortnight or up to. And then I'm away again. I know. I'm away again in late August for 10 days.
Should we exercise our power to levy additional tax? And I think we should call it the
what?
Right, items for information, George.
None for me, thank you.
Sue.
No.
Not.
Collins. Leslie.
Nope.
Paul. Okay.
Of course. PCSO's report. Crime has continued to remain low in Wittersham and surrounding areas with few incidents being reported. We would like to remind all residents to stay vigilant and etc. So we talked about the online crime reporting, which is said before. We have been having a spate of burglaries in the area and surrounding areas which we are investigating. Please can we ask that you are doing the following, which is keep front gate closed at all times, windows shut, and lock all external doors, etc. So there's nothing newish.
I'm amazed to see that out of something like, is it 57 crimes committed in Wittersham, 2 have been solved?
That's the Sunday.
Well, Kent is actually not doing too well, or depending on how you look at the table, we're near the top or the bottom. In the number of crimes that haven't been solved where the police know who did it. They have suspects, but they haven't got the resources to follow up. And their excuse was
that they can only solve 2.
Well, the excuse was that over 40% of domestic abuse, which doesn't condone it, but they really struggle to have the resources to get involved in something like that.
Okay.
So,
Next one.
but it's a shocking.
Right, I went to the planning, introduction to planning, which was led by Lindsay Frost, who's the chap, the planning advisor for Calc that
Gave us the advice.
Yeah.
and he has been a planning officer in quite a few boroughs, so he knows his stuff. So what I was going to do, these were the
notes.
Yes. So I made little notes against some of them.
Oh.
So I was going to circulate it so that
Yes,
you can
please.
see what he had to
Yes,
say.
you'd be very useful.
Interesting.
So, I mean, this was the rights of local councils to be notified. I mean, that's a bit thick. And this is. This is, I mean, how to respond to planning applications, an 8-step guide, but it is from the campaign to protect natural England, rural England rather, although it is got an ALC stamp on it, so I haven't actually gone through that. But it was interesting. It was 3 hours worth. We got a decent sandwich too, Waitrose sandwich.
A weight loss. Top market.
Calc do quite decent lunches usually.
Yes.
So how will you do that?
I'm going to circulate it in
Just
a
go
normal
down.
way,
All right.
but I
One of us
haven't
could take it to client, could we?
Well, if I'd written on it, yes. If not, I will stick it through your door in the
Okay.
morning when I'm here
Okay.
walking.
Okay. Right, anything else?
No.
No, I don't think
Okay,
so.
just 2 things from me then. Have people seen this?
Yes.
It's
No.
available in the shop. Yvonne has, because I showed it to her.
£1.50 each.
£1.50 in the shop.
You told me that.
I know. Oh, I totally told you.
What is it?
It's a Wittersham postcard produced by Carolyn Everett with A to Z, with pictures in Wittersham of each one, and actually little descriptions slotted in with what they all are. So it's quite cleverly done, and she put some effort into
Yes, she
finding
has.
how to fit it all together, and then she's had a load printed. They can be done other sizes as well. This has been turned into a postcard. It's being sold in favour of the church, I think.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yes.
There are a lot in the church.
Anyway, I'll pass it round. They are, as I say, they're available in the shop for £1.50. She saw me in the street and gave me that one. So
Did you?
I have to declare it.
Interesting. You didn't do it.
If you're in the congregation of the church, you have to declare a pecuniary interest.
Dax has got it on the counter.
The other thing to mention is that it's Calc next week when I will be in Germany. So
Oh,
Good old
God, you're so
George.
excited.
When is it? Tuesday?
And you've been in
Wednesday.
charge.
Wednesday. Oh, at least it's not this Wednesday. That's right.
Yvonne, you could send George.
Yeah,
the
could you
agenda.
send me this stuff?
Yvonne, who's
Do
manning the post
George, you
office?
get it already.
Do I?
You have
It's there.
I'm on the list, aren't
Yes.
Is it?
It's there.
I? I have got it.
I never knew.
Behind that door.
The what?
Top, post office.
Post office is
Post
there.
office, is it? On Tuesday.
Yeah, but the picture, I think,
When
of the old post.
unless it doesn't turn up.
She's in there all the time.
She's
always
We
in
have a
there.
post office
She's
every
always
week.
Don't you start.
I haven't seen it.
Oh, sorry.
No.
I came in the fortnight ago. She says not turning up.
Does anyone else have any other information?
No, thank you.
Otherwise,
No,
we'll
you see it,
close the
sir.
meeting then. Thank
You
you
see
very much.
Yes.
And it can be.
If we had decent internet, we'd know whether it was France or Belgium.